Chapter 1. The Silent Signal. In the year 2245, humanity had spread across the stars, leaving behind colonies and mining stations scattered across distant worlds. The cargo vessel Erebus received an automated distress signal from a deep space research outpost known as Alio Station, orbiting a desolate planet called Cerberus 9. Captain Mara Holt, a no-nonsense leader, orders her crew to investigate. Among them are Security Officer Dax, Engineer Samira Rao, and exobiologist Dr. Orion Kale. As they approach the station, its skeletal silhouette drifts against the dim light of a dying star. Chapter 2. Boarding the Dead. The airlock creaks as the crew enters Alio Station. The halls are dark, with emergency lights flickering in sporadic bursts. Dax sweeps the area with his rifle, while Samira restores limited power. Dr. Kale discovers blood smeared across control panels and unsettling claw-like marks along the walls. The station's logs reveal fragmented messages. "They're awake, we shouldn't have, it's spreading." Before they can piece the puzzle together, they hear distant scratching sounds echoing from the ventilation ducts. Chapter 3. Beneath the surface. Exploring further, they discover a hidden elevator leading deep below the station into a sub-level research facility. Dr. Kale deciphers the logs and realizes the scientists had discovered an ancient alien artifact buried in Cerberus 9's crust. It emitted an otherworldly signal, driving those exposed to madness. Samira discovers organic growth spreading across machinery, pulsating as though alive. As the team investigates, Dax spots movement in the shadows. Something is stalking them. Chapter 4. The Awakening. The crew is ambushed by creatures, twisted humanoid figures with elongated limbs and glowing eyes. Dax manages to fend them off, but Samira is dragged into the darkness. Mara insists they press on, hoping to find answers and a way to stop the infection. Dr. Kale theorizes that destroying the artifact might break the signal's control over the infected. Chapter 5. The Artifact. At the cavern's heart, they find the artifact, a colossal monolith pulsing with an alien hum. The infected swarm the chamber, drawn by its energy. In a desperate fight, Dax sacrifices himself to buy time for Mara and Dr. Kale to set explosives. With seconds to spare, they detonate the charges, shattering the artifact. Chapter 6. The Escape. The explosion destabilizes the station, causing it to collapse. Mara and Dr. Kale race back to the Erebus amid falling debris and enraged infected. They barely make it aboard as the station implodes in a burst of light and fire. As they drift away from the dying station, Mara looks out into the void, haunted by the signal still faintly echoing in her comms. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. Days pass in silence aboard the Erebus. Dr. Kale obsessively examines fragments of data recovered from the station. Mara struggles with survivors' guilt and nightmares of the infected creatures. Kale uncovers a disturbing truth: the signal wasn't entirely destroyed. Traces of its frequency remain embedded in their ship's systems. Mara debates whether to return to Earth or isolate themselves in deep space. Chapter 8. Echoes of the signal. As they near a refueling station, strange malfunctions begin aboard the Erebus. Lights flicker, air systems glitch, and faint whispers echo through the comms. Dr. Kale becomes increasingly erratic, convinced the artifact signal is influencing him. One night, Mara finds him attempting to broadcast the remnants of the signal into space. A violent struggle ensues, ending with Kale accidentally venting himself into the void. Chapter 9. Isolation. Alone aboard the Erebus, Mara disables the communication systems and manually purges the ship's data banks. But the whispers persist, faint and unrelenting. Her mental state deteriorates as the lines between reality and hallucination blur. Desperate, she programs the Erebus's navigation systems to fly into the nearest star, hoping to end the signal's spread once and for all. Chapter 10. The Final Transmission. As the Erebus drifts closer to the blazing star, Mara records a final log. Her voice trembles as she speaks of the artifact, the infected, and the unstoppable pull of the signal. Just before impact, a transmission fragment escapes into space, barely a whisper of what occurred on Cerberus 9. The Erebus is consumed by fire, and Mara's story ends. Epilogue. A faint signal. Back on Earth, corporate officials examine the final transmission from the Erebus. Despite Mara's sacrifice, Faint traces of the artifact's signal persist in the company's backup servers. In a shadowy boardroom, a high-ranking executive smirks as a status update flashes on his screen. Signal decryption, 78% complete. The camera pans to deep space, where faint lights flicker near Cerberus 9. The signal, faint yet persistent, continues to call out into the void. The end. Echoes of the void. The ISS Concordia was humanity's crown jewel, a deep space research vessel equipped with state-of-the-art technology, carrying a crew of 250 scientists, engineers, and security personnel. Its mission: to investigate a mysterious signal emanating from an uncharted region of the galaxy known as the Black Expanse. The signal was faint but persistent, an unnatural rhythm that seemed to pulse with intention. After 2 years of travel, the Concordia arrived at its destination, a derelict structure floating in the void. The ship's scanners struggled to classify it. The construct was massive, its spires twisting like jagged obsidian teeth. No signs of life, no discernible origin, just an ancient, malevolent presence. Captain Adrienne Kale stood on the bridge, her jaw set tight. "Activate the drone team," she ordered. "We're not sending anyone inside until we know what we're dealing with." The drones fed back grainy footage as they navigated the labyrinthine interior of the structure. The walls were inscribed with glyphs that seemed to shimmer and writhe when observed too long. The airless corridors echoed with faint whispers that shouldn't have been possible. Then the feed cut to static. "We lost all 6 drones," reported Chief Engineer Marcus Wynne, his voice tense. "Retrieve them," Captain Kale ordered. "With all due respect," interjected Dr. Eliza Voss, the lead xenolinguist, "something in there doesn't want us to understand it. Those glyphs, they're more than symbols. They're alive." Kale's steely gaze didn't waver. "We're here to get answers, Doctor. Gear up." The team of 10 descended into the structure, their helmets' lights cutting through the oppressive darkness. Every step echoed endlessly, as if the walls were mocking their intrusion. Dr. Voss trailed her fingers over the glyphs, her gloved hand trembling. "They're reading me," she murmured. "Keep moving," Kale barked. In the heart of the construct, they found it, a chamber dominated by a pulsating sphere of black ichor, suspended in midair by tendrils of liquid shadow. The signal was coming from the sphere, its rhythm now deafening within their comms. "It's alive," Voss whispered. Her voice trembled with both awe and terror. "Secure samples," Kale ordered. As they approached, the sphere reacted. Shadows snaked out, enveloping 2 crew members in an instant. Their screams reverberated before cutting off abruptly. The remaining team fired their weapons, but the shadows absorbed the energy, growing larger with each pulse of the sphere. "Retreat!" Kale shouted. The survivors barely made it back to the Concordia. Whatever the sphere was, it wasn't content to stay contained. Tendrils of darkness followed them, spreading through the ship like a virus. It corrupted systems, turning lights into strobes and twisting gravity in localized pockets. Crew members began to disappear, their screams echoing through the corridors. Dr. Voss locked herself in the lab, feverishly analyzing the samples they had managed to collect. Her findings were grim. "It's not just alive," she explained to Kale over the comms. "It's sentient. And it's hungry. Those glyphs. They're a language of predation. This thing has devoured civilizations before. It's been waiting for us. Can we destroy it?" Kale demanded. "No," Voss replied. "But we might contain it. If we overload the ship's core, we can create a localized singularity. It'll pull the construct and itself into oblivion." "That's a suicide mission," Kale said. "There's no other way," Voss replied, her voice hollow. "This thing can't reach Earth." As the shadows consumed more of the ship, Kale rallied the remaining crew. "We're humanity's last line of defense. We're not making it out of this, but we'll make damn sure nothing follows us home." The plan was set. Kale, Voss, and Wynne would manually overload the core while the rest of the crew created distractions to slow the entity's advance. The ship became a battleground, the shadows coalescing into grotesque forms, parodies of the crew they had consumed. In the engine room, Kale and her team worked frantically. The core's hum grew to a deafening roar as it neared critical mass. The shadows breached the chamber, tearing Wynne apart before he could scream. Kale and Voss stood back to back, firing futilely as they activated the final sequence. "You're a hell of a captain," Voss said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "And you're a hell of a scientist," Kale replied. The core detonated, light consuming the void as the Concordia and the Construct were obliterated. But the story didn't end there. Months later, a faint signal was detected on the outskirts of the solar system. A rhythmic pulse, persistent and unnatural. A salvage team was dispatched to investigate. They found a fragment of the Concordia adrift, its walls inscribed with shimmering glyphs. And in the shadows, something moved. Chapter 1: The Arrival. The Oblivion, a deep space exploration vessel, orbited a newly discovered exoplanet named Viridian X. The planet was shrouded in swirling green mist, its surface dotted with strange, crystalline formations that glimmered under its dim sun. The crew, a mix of scientists, engineers, and security personnel, had been tasked with investigating an ancient signal emanating from the planet, a signal predating human civilization by millions of years. Commander Elise Hart stood on the bridge, staring at the planet's surface through the viewport. "Sensors online?" she asked. "Yes," replied Dr. Leanne Vega, the ship's lead scientist. "The signal is pulsing at regular intervals, originating from beneath the largest crystalline structure. Whatever's down there, it's ancient." Elise nodded. "Prepare the landing party. Let's see what's calling to us." Chapter 2: The Descent. The landing team consisted of Elise, Leanne, 2 security officers, and an engineer named Carter. As the shuttle broke through Viridian X's atmosphere, turbulence rattled the crew. The mist seemed almost alive, clinging to the craft as it descended. When they landed, the air was unnaturally still. The crystalline structures loomed overhead, emitting a faint hum that vibrated in their chests. The team set up a perimeter as Leanne began scanning the area. "The signal is coming from directly below us," she said, pointing to a narrow fissure in the ground. "We'll need to descend." The fissure opened into a cavern lined with bioluminescent crystals. The light cast eerie shadows on the walls as the team rappelled down. At the center of the cavern was a monolithic structure, covered in alien glyphs that seemed to shift and writhe when viewed directly. "This isn't just a signal transmitter," Leanne whispered. "It's a gateway." Chapter 3: Awakening the Gate. As Leanne deciphered the glyphs, Carter noticed something odd. "Commander, the crystals, they're growing." Indeed, the formations seemed to be expanding, creeping toward the team. Leanne, oblivious to the encroaching danger, pressed her hand to the monolith. The glyphs flared to life, bathing the cavern in an unnatural light. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber as the ground trembled. The monolith split open, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness. From within came a sound, a guttural, otherworldly whisper that resonated in their minds. "We've woken something," Elise said, drawing her weapon. "Fall back." But it was too late. Tendrils of shadow erupted from the vortex, pulling one of the security officers into the void. His screams echoed briefly before being silenced. Chapter 4: The Retreat. Panic set in as the remaining team scrambled to escape. The tendrils lashed out, snaring Carter. Elise fired at the shadows, but the bullets passed through harmlessly. "Leave me," Carter shouted as the tendrils dragged him toward the vortex. Elise hesitated but knew he was right. She and Leanne made it to the surface with the remaining officer, Sergeant Mills, as the fissure sealed shut behind them. "What the hell was that?" Mills demanded, his voice shaking. Leanne, pale and trembling, replied, "I don't know, but it's sentient. And it's not from this universe." Chapter 5: Containment. Back on the Oblivion, Elise ordered an immediate lockdown. "No one sets foot on that planet again. We're leaving." But the ship's systems began to fail. Lights flickered, and strange whispers echoed through the corridors. Leanne ran a diagnostic and froze. The signal, it's inside the ship. The crystalline formations had somehow spread to the Oblivion, infecting its systems. Crew members began disappearing, and those who remained reported seeing shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their vision. Chapter 6: The Sacrifice. Elise realized there was only one way to stop the spread. We'll have to destroy the ship. Leanne protested. There's so much we can learn. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. It'll also be the death of us, Elise replied. Prepare the reactor for overload. As the remaining crew worked to set the ship's self-destruct sequence, the shadows became more aggressive. Mills was pulled into the darkness, his screams echoing through the ship. Leanne and Elise were the only ones left. Go, Elise said, shoving Leanne into an escape pod. Someone has to tell the story. Leanne hesitated but obeyed. As the pod launched, she watched the Oblivion explode, the blast briefly illuminating the dark expanse of space. Epilogue: The Echo. Leanne's pod was recovered weeks later. She was incoherent, muttering about shadows and gateways. The recording she brought back was classified, but rumors spread among the stars about the Oblivion and its ill-fated mission. And on Viridian X, the signal resumed, stronger than ever.